Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hello to everyone on the computer. Hopefully it's not too late or too early for you all, and welcome to everyone in the audience. This session is on climate and reproductive justice. My name is Sophia Heffernan, and I am the Advocacy and Partnerships Associate at FP 2030. Over the past few years, FP 2030 has prioritized emergency response and resilience in order to contribute to more resilient communities and systems. This can be seen in the renewed focus of emergency preparedness, response, and resilience seen in both country and non-governmental actor commitments, some of whom are with us today. These commitments include response and resilience and we can see that is incredibly important as we know that climate change is changing so many of the ways that we do things and the systems that we know. I'm really excited to have three panelists here with us today. We have Dr. Malia Khan, the President and CEO of Women Deliver, John Penn, who is right here, Senior Director for Strategic Communications at PRB, and Karen Morrison, who is the Vice President International at the International Crane Foundation. So in order to get started, all panelists will first share how their organization is working to build more resilient communities through stronger commitments to family planning and women's empowerment. First, we will hear from Malia Khan, who unfortunately is not here with us today, but who has sent in her video remarks. And they'll appear on the screen shortly.
I am Malia Khan, the President and CEO of Women Deliver, and I wanted to thank FP 2030, including us in this program. We know that the climate crisis is affecting more and more populations with the devastating effects of shocks and stresses that are increasing every day in their severity and also in their impact. We also know that the impact of these shocks and stresses is not felt equally across the world. Poor and vulnerable populations from around the world, particularly those from low and middle income countries, are feeling the effects of these on their lives by far the most. Particular amongst these are adolescent girls and women of reproductive health age, who not only are the least able to bear the shocks and stresses, have the least ability to adapt and cope with the effects of those, but are also the ones who are often burdened with the coping strategies that communities and households have to use in order to face these shocks and stresses. So for instance, the increased care burden that's put on girls and women, the fact that girls often get pulled out of school as a coping strategy, or in extreme cases, early marriage is used as a way of protecting girls and women and reducing the burden on the household. In order to deal with this, we must ensure that those that suffer the most from climate change, their resilience is built and that their services to them continue to be provided. Critical amongst these are sexual reproductive health and rights and services so that they're able to cope with the shocks and stresses that they face. Women Deliver is building on its decade-long advocacy experience and continuing to advocate for organizations and member states to look at the connections between gender justice and climate justice to ensure that girls and women are fully able to achieve their bodily autonomy and have access to sexual reproductive health and rights services, even in times of crises. Women Deliver does this in a couple of different ways. We support the Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights and Climate Justice Coalition, which consists of 60 organizations that are doing advocacy around the world, to ensure that the nexus between these two is highlighted. In addition, we've been generating evidence about the effects of climate change shocks and stresses on vulnerable populations, particularly girls and women. And in addition to that, we will be featuring this as one of the central themes to the Women Deliver 2023 conference that's going to be held in Kigali. In the future, we want to continue to advocate that those who suffer the least from those who suffer the most, those who suffer the most from climate change have a say in how it's dealt with, and also that we must focus our efforts in building their capacity to be able to deal with these shocks and stresses. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Malia. I just want to highlight, what she mentioned about prioritizing adolescents and youth in this conversation as well. I think that's an extremely important topic, and we thank Women Deliver and their commitment to FP 2030, and you can see their commitment to FP 2030 on our website. Quick little plug, so go and check that out. And now I'm going to turn it over to John, who is from PRB, whose commitment you can also see on our website, to walk us through how PRB is working to build more resilient communities through stronger commitments to FP and women's empowerment. Over to you, John.
Great, thank you very much for that. So we believe that access to a voluntary sexual and reproductive health is not just a fundamental human right, but is also a key investment that should be made to ensure climate resilience, to work towards it. PRB is a very sort of data-centric, data-driven organization. So we see a big part of our role going forward is to help to build the evidence base about sort of what's working, and to show the impact of family planning, and to show the impact of women's empowerment, and to help highlight its contributions to things like economic development, to gender equity, and to resilience. In a kind of a similar vein, that involves working with, partnering with local organizations around the world, women's organizations, youth-led organizations, civil society, advocacy groups, to make sure that they have the data and evidence that they need to make the case to stakeholders and policymakers, government officials, for more investment and sexual and reproductive health as a strategy to address resilience. We also think it's really important to engage with journalists, to provide training, to ensure there's an evidence-based in reporting, and to help make the linkages between family planning, between gender, and between resilience. I don't think that's widely known or widely appreciated, those connections, so we think it's really important to elevate those. Another kind of priority for us is that, given the impacts we're going to see from climate change, they'll sort of promote mass migrations and, huge disruptions. Many people will move on to try to improve livelihoods, but many will be left behind. And disproportionately women and youth, they won't be able to migrate for better lives. So it's really important to work with policymakers and other stakeholders to ensure that their needs are being met, they're not being forgotten, that we can anticipate those needs and get ahead of them. And just finally, and more broadly, we think it's very important just to anchor the global response to climate change in women-centric policies. They're an incredibly important contributor to resilience.
Thanks so much, John. I know that PRB has been doing this work for a long time, so we're really looking forward to continuing our partnership with you all and to learn from you all on how we can continue to contribute to this intersection. So thank you for those remarks. And now we're going to turn it over to another video remarks from Karen Morrison from the International Crane Foundation. And the International Crane Foundation, unlike PRB and unlike Women Deliver, are first-time FP 2030 commitment makers. So we're thrilled to hear from Karen, and I believe she's calling in all the way from Wisconsin. So over to the video from Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Morrison, Director of Africa at the International Crane Foundation. We work worldwide to conserve cranes and the ecosystems, watersheds, and flyways on which they depend. As a conservation organization, we have seen firsthand the important links between human and environmental health, and specifically how reproductive health is fundamental to the work we do in the last mile communities we serve. We have been working increasingly with health partners, including the Margaret Pike Trust, another FP 2030 commitment maker, to integrate reproductive health actions into our conservation approach in 8 communities in southwestern Uganda. We are implementing a project that recognizes the importance of removing barriers to family planning as a pillar of biodiversity conservation, in addition to being vital for the well-being and empowerment of women and girls. We have also trained 649 community members, primarily women, in climate-smart agricultural practices. Women are often the backbone of these agricultural landscapes, and improving farming practices improves the resilience and livelihoods of households in general. Already, we are seeing the results in the communities. Overall greater impact, accelerating progress on gender, health, livelihoods, conservation, and climate goals. Working across the health and conservation sectors enables us to reach more people than we would through a traditional single sector conservation program. We can truly begin to tackle deeply rooted challenges: lack of sustainable livelihoods, biodiversity loss, climate change, gender inequality, and the unmet need for family planning. By 2030, through working with partners in health, we will reach at least 30 communities and 5,000 households with this approach. We will train 2,000 community members, primarily women, and will reach at least 1 million people with our integrated message. As a conservation organization, we are extremely proud to improve human and environmental health in last mile communities, thanks to the partnership with health actors that have allowed us to integrate reproductive health with our conservation work.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Yes, clapping to all 3 of our panelists. It's great to hear about the commitments to both climate justice and reproductive justice. And again, you can read more about these commitments at FP2030.org. Again, thank you to our 3 panelists for prioritizing this work and for making sure climate justice is talked about in relation to family planning. John, I want to turn it back to you for the final word, and I'm hoping that you can talk about one link between climate change and family planning and why you think it's important to be present in both of these movements. Thank you.
Okay, no, great. Thank you for the question. I mean, among the many negative impacts of climate change, the fact that climate change sort of increases inequities, it disproportionately impacts women and girls, and it reduces the resources that are most available, to the most vulnerable. And yet, sort of women are really on the front lines of climate action and response. So they really need to be front and center in terms of our thinking about resilience. And that only really works, though. The kind of linchpin of that is the notion of agency. So when there is agency, and when women do have the ability to exercise choice about if, when, how many children to have, and and have the freedom to do so without discrimination, without coercion, without violence. So if those conditions exist, then lots of good things can happen. I mean, they can put families and communities on stronger economic footing. Educational attainment is boosted. Health outcomes are boosted, and all these things taken together help families to better navigate through the shocks and stresses of climate change, and they help them to sort of navigate through the choppy waters that are to come. So this is, I think, a really important point to underscore.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I just want to reiterate the importance of these conversations. I sometimes feel like they're often riddled with sadness, but I do think that there is hope and you can see it in these commitment makers actually moving this work forward and progressing in terms of making sure that these topics are not siloed, and making sure that we're thinking about the last mile, and thinking about climate resiliency and climate adaptation in relation to sexual reproductive health and rights. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, John, and to Karen and Maliha too. We're just really happy to continue this conversation and hope that these conversations can continue to happen at ICFP and in the FP